Hey, and welcome back to the channel. This week's little bit of wisdom was first taught to me over 30 years ago. I was in my early 30s then, and I read a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by a gentleman called Stephen Covey. That book had a huge impact on me, and I never really looked at life in the same way. One of the stories in the book that had a huge impact on me was in the chapter called Putting First Things First. And it tells the story of a university professor who comes into his class and one day takes a jar and a pile of rocks, and he puts a pile of rocks in the jar. And he essentially says, "Is the jar full?" And the class says, "Well, you can't put any more rocks in there." So yes, the jar must be full. So he proceeds to then fill this with sand. I'm not going to do it for you now. And he then asks the same question. Once he's poured all the sand around the rocks, is the jar now full? And again, the class says, well, yeah, you can't get anything else in there. So he then takes a jug of water, and the class is now starting to get the idea, and he proceeds to pour the water into the jar, and everybody agrees the jar is now full. Now, although that's an interesting story, that's not really what made a huge impact on me. What made an impact on me was the next bit, which is he asked the class, what's the reason or what's the meaning behind this demonstration that I've shown you? And he says, I want you to think of this jar as 24 hours of your day. And essentially what the class said was, well, what you're trying to demonstrate is that no matter how busy you think you are, there's always room for something else. He says, no, that's not really the point at all. The point I'm trying to make here is that this represents 24 hours of your life. If you don't put the big rocks of your life in first, you will never ever be able to fit them in. Essentially what he's saying is that the sand and the water, everything else that fills around the rocks, they're the daily interruptions that we all get. The emails, the SMSs, the constant phone calls, demands on us as we get through the day. And it's very easy to forget to put these big rocks in your life in your 24 hours. And that's really the point he was trying to make. It's so important to decide what are the important things in your life and make time for them in your 24 hours. My mentor, Jim Rohn, said, never ever start the day until you have it finished on paper. And I can tell you, I really live by that motto. I come down here every morning, usually between 5-6 o'clock in the morning. And this is where I do my journaling and my morning routine. And this jar sits here on the library to remind me to make sure that as I plan my day, I include some of my big rocks. So what I'll do, I'll show you some of my big rocks that are in this jar. The first one there is relationships. Obviously, we are a tribal species. We need people around us. We're not good at being hermits. So having relationships and working on those relationships is very, very important to me, and I think to most of us. So relationships, you got to make time, have time out, have time for each other in your day, and put it in your calendar. Don't let it just try and say, well, we'll get round to it. No, put a date night in there. Put a date in the calendar to go out to dinner, go and do something. Don't wait for it to happen, because it won't. Let's have a look at another one. This is probably a big rock for everybody, and this is your health. You must look after your own body. It's the only vehicle that is going to get you from A to B and get you through your life. As far as I know, you only get one go at it. So you've got to look after your health. I have an Apple Watch. Every day I close the rings. That means I've got to move 12 times. I do 1 hour of exercise, and I burn 3,600 kilojoules every day. And I've done that consistently now for well over 6 months. Before that, I had a Fitbit, and I used to walk over 10,000 steps. I did that for 3 years. So you've got to work on your health. It's a big rock, and I allocate time for that. As soon as I finish my morning routine, Jen and I are off, and we do our power walking for the morning. If it's raining, I'm normally off on my own. She says, you can have that, I'm staying here. But I get out there every day. The last one I want to share with you in my jar of rocks is travel. I love to see the world. I forget the gentleman who actually said it, but someone once quoted, he said that travel is a bit like reading a book. If you don't travel, you're only reading one chapter. And I think that is so true. There is so much to see in this world, and I want to see as much of it as I can. To that end, I've actually got travel planned now for October to Thailand, then next February off to the Maldives, and then next July off to Europe for about 6 weeks to tick off some big goals that I've set myself. So they're the big rocks in my life. I would ask you to sit down and decide what are the big rocks in your life, and then make sure you actually put time aside for them every day in your day to make sure these don't get neglected. How you do that, that's the subject for another video. But thank you for your time and attention. I wish you all the best. Stay wise.